Today, we are back at the table to talk about everything related to historical wargaming. And today's show, we're going to hit the topic of what was the best era of wargaming. Now, that can be a two-folded question. It could be what is the era that's best to be played, or what was the best era for wargaming? We'll talk about that, catch up on some news. We'll catch up on what Jim's been doing, and much, much more right after this in three, two.
Big Duke 6 Eagle Thrust. Put on War Hop. Sing it loud. And the Romeo Foxtrot. Shall we dance?
You are listening to the Sitrep podcast, your source for everything related to historical wargaming. Whether you are looking for the latest wargaming news, reviews, painting tutorials, or playthroughs, you will hear about it right here. So grab your favorite beverage or brush and let's hit it.
Okay, we're back. Welcome, everybody. And I will get everything set up the way we need to have it set up. Perfect. Jim, welcome back to the show. I hope you've had some good rest. I saw some beach pictures at some point, which, I'm not too surprised since you literally live almost on the beach. But, I hope you got to get away and enjoy some of that beautiful Florida fall weather. Hey, Jim, your mic's muted.
Apologies for that. Hello,
That's okay,
everybody.
no problem.
What I was trying to say was it's been great so far. As far as taking some time off. The weather's finally getting nice down here. I mean, this is Florida. We're basically in opposite world.
Mhm.
When everyone else's weather gets terrible, ours actually starts to get nice. So yeah, it's been great so far. Definitely taking the opportunity to relax a little bit.
Good. Well deserved. Well deserved. Have you been doing any hobbying during your time off, or just pretty much?
Not really.
Okay.
We did run one game with Mark Ritchie's Tactical Combat, where we did sort of a 80th anniversary commemorative game of Tarawa. I've been helping out some guys in our Discord with Panzer Leader,
Mm-hmm.
questions and conversion tables and stuff like that, and helping Damon with some. He's got a U.S. Marine Corps project going, so like World War II, a U.S. Marine Corps. So like just some basic questions.
Very nice. That's pretty awesome. So, yeah, Jim has been on a sabbatical, if you will. The poor man runs his fingers to the bone 10 ways to Sunday, and he needed some time, well-deserved time off. So I hope you're recharging those batteries and all that, and everything's doing well for you.
Yep.
For me, as you know, last Sunday for the Halloween show, nowhere compares to Jim's typical annual Halloween game, but I delved back into the days of the Roman Empire and chariots.
Yeah, I saw that. That was a good video.
Thank you. Tuffy's in the house. Welcome. Good morning. So I found a virtual version of essentially the rule set is essentially Circus Maximus from Avalon Hill. The way you set up your teams and the way it races, it's almost a literal digital adaptation of it. It's fun, but I found it lacking in one big area, and that is it's only single player. If you've ever played Circus Maximus, the more people you have racing chariots in the circus, the more fun it is. Because it's all out. You're crashing chariots and whipping horses, and you can even whip the other person's horses to make them go faster in turns, and all that fun stuff. So while this game touched on the flavor of Circus Maximus, it didn't quite fill the cup, if you will. So yeah. It was very interesting. They do have a second edition coming out, which would be multiplayer. So when that comes out, we'll see how that goes. Other than that, I've been digging into an older project, and I'm going to just shoot over to another camera here real quick. These guys. So these are 3 mil, and I'll bring them up a little closer. Those are 3 mil M1s. There's the
Nice.
headquarters squad troop. This is a troop, so this is an armored cav. So you have squadrons, and then the headquarters. So
Awesome.
because I'm looking forward to getting them on the table, and I might even go hexes with those, for the tabletop, and almost do a. What drove me to this? There was a game that's played by the Midwest Historical Miniature Game Society. They had their, we covered Autumn Wars. Unfortunately, we had a lot of corrupted files in our video files, so we were only able to get out like 2 interviews. It is a very small event, anyways. I think it's a single room event, but they host Panzer Blitz or Panzer Leader, one of the two, in miniature form on a big, hex table. I'm like, well, why can't we do something similar in moderns, right?
And we do Panzer Leader Modern all the time.
Yeah. So, and then that led me to another thought: is does it have to be truly historical? What I mean by that is, we talk about the Fulda Gap a lot and other what ifs, and it's like, well, what if the Russians did break through in Eastern Germany somewhere, now that Germany's one country, and how would we respond and all that? So to take 3 mil, I know 3 mil's a lot, but when you're talking about a 4x4, 4x6 table, 3 mil versus 6, 10, 12, 20, 20, 8, whatever, gives you a little bit more perspective on ranges and distances and things like that. I won't go any smaller than 3 mil. I've seen guys play 2 mil, and it's basically just a little lump of lead, on a base, and they put a little paint on and say, that's that. Oh, okay. At least at 3 mil, I still get a little bit of detail on the miniatures here. I'll shoot back to it real quick and see if I can get the camera to focus on it, which it should. There it goes. And so you can still tell that's an M1, and you've got Humvees and you've got trucks there. This is the headquarters,
Right.
So
your 65 and 66 track.
Yeah. So, and that way, even if you're limited for space, you can still play a pretty decent game. And then I wanted to take it one step further. And Jim and I's most favorite modern armored game rule set ever, Team Yankee.
Okay.
and improve on it, right? If you guys have ever played, and I don't want to bash Team Yankee or the guys there, but it's a parking lot game at 28 mil. You're literally on a 4x4 table, and especially if you're playing the Russians, you just have armor and vehicles everywhere, and it's literally stacked next to each other.
I think a lot of that is the event we were at. They were limited to 4x4 tables.
Yeah.
And a lot of the parking lot stuff that you do see in the game, to be honest, it might not be the most popular opinion, but I think whenever bolt action's a game for, very basic players, or nobody plays bolt action historically, or Team Yankee's a parking lot game. Whenever a game picks up a certain reputation, a lot of times I feel that it's not the game's fault. It's the community's fault. It's the players.
Okay. Yeah.
People build a list for Team Yankee. If they would build like a realistic list, I think the parking lot mechanic, the parking lot phenomenon would be largely mitigated.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, Team Yankee is a tank game. I mean, let's be fair, and they just load up on tanks. And yeah, especially if you're the Russians. And the Russian tanks in Team Yankee are OP as it is, and they're still like 1/3 the power. So you need 3 times as many. Before you know it, yeah, you've got a parking lot.
Yeah. So I thought maybe we shrink it down and use the same rule set and their TOE and everything, and because that's what these are based off of, is the squad set, lists in Team Yankee, and just put them on the table, So I don't. Is it 1-to-1 in Team Yankee? Like the squad, or is it a tank represents?
In Team Yankee, it's still one tank is one tank. It's
Okay.
basically squad level.
Yeah.
So like a stand of infantry is like a team or something, and then a vehicle is a vehicle.
Yeah.
The only other rule that I general mechanic that grinds my gears in Team Yankee a little bit, I call it like the Mexican jumping bean effect. And it's their way to avoid headhunting. I get it. And, otherwise every platoon leader would die first. Every company commander would die first. And it's okay if you hit the company commander, he's like in a quantum state. He wasn't really there. He was in the next tank over or something like that. So I don't know how you would fix that, but maybe if you like put like a tiny little like red dot underneath your tank or something like that, that in other words your opponent can't see it.
Mm-hmm.
And then if he points at that tank and you flip the tank over to reveal that that was the commander, then he's out of commission.
Yeah.
He's either dead or he's wounded or he's looking for a new tank or something.
I mean, in the way as it should be. I mean, in actual, I'm not a tanker by any means. Never, that armor was never my thing. But when we were out practicing with laws or whatever anti-tank weapon we had, we didn't know who the tank commander was unless somehow you were able to identify him based on actions. Him standing out of the cupola and giving orders and seeing him moving around. But every vehicle has a track commander. You may not be the platoon or company commander, but you have a track commander. So you do what you got to do. Morning, everybody. Welcome everybody to the show. Tuffy, Jen, Damon.
Damon, we were just talking about you briefly.
Yeah.
Your ears must have been burning.
But I like your idea about that, Jim. I mean, obviously.
I understand the reason for their rule. We ran across the problem when I was tinkering around with Battle Carry Sabo. Is why doesn't everyone just instantly shoot at the commander? And this does happen in World War II. Russian tank companies of 10 tanks, only the company commander would have a radio. So all the Germans had to do was look for that one tank that has an antenna. Oh, ping. And then the company falls apart. I mean, even if the crews weren't badly trained, they don't have a radio. They can't talk to each other.
Sure.
So it definitely does happen. If you can identify somehow which vehicle the commander is. The problem is that in some games, Team Yankee is certainly not the only one. You can very easily tell who the commander is because you're got like this God's eye game perspective, and all the commanders are dead. And now all the command and control rules activate, and the game falls apart. There's a couple ways to handle it. You can either have that hidden somehow. That's what I'm talking about. Like, okay, this tank's blown up. You flip it over. There's no red dot. That wasn't the commander.
Yeah.
Or the way we tried to do it in Battle Carry Sabo. Okay, cool. You knock out the commander. Like you said, every tank has a TC in it. Okay, well the next guy in line is now,
exactly.
the next guy
like they would do in real life.
There's 4 tanks in a platoon and or a troop. Depending on the parent unit, and boom, the next guy takes over. Now it's not as great. You might have a 3 instead of a 4 or something like that as far as a command rating, but that's literally how it goes. It also allows you to really highlight the difference between a Western style army and an old school Cold War Soviet style army, because some of their commanders were pretty good. Some of their commanders, we all like to make fun of the Russians these days. It's kind of in fashion for some reason. I can't imagine why. The problem is once he goes, or even if he just loses his radio, even if he's not physically dead, who's taken over now? I mean, Soviet NCOs were not trained to act as their officers. Corporals couldn't do sergeants' jobs, privates couldn't do corporals' jobs, lieutenants couldn't do captains' jobs. And if you could actually knock out that one over-centralized command point, the force would more or less disassemble itself right there in the field. So if you've got your commander with a rating of 5 and everyone else in your, say, some sort of commander rating, and everybody else has a 1, okay, you knock out the commander, that's a big deal. And an American force or a British force or a West German force, the commander might have a 5, but his XO has a 4. And then first company commander has a 3, second company commander has a 3. So even if you do, they're a lot more resilient when it comes to command structure.
So I just thought of something. Jim, why don't you give a little bit of background for people who may not know about Battle Carry Sabo?
Battle Carry Sabo was the embryonic beginnings of a game. Never got finished. That was kind of, I don't want to say Team Yankee, but it was modern tank combat. Damon's
Mhm.
played it a couple times. I think you and Rasmus tried it in
Yep.
Korea.
Yeah.
You and Rasmus also tried it in the Gulf. That's what it was originally designed for. 73 Easting, Medina Ridge, stuff like that.
Yeah.
1991 Gulf War games. It was rolled out as part of our 30th anniversary content for the Gulf War in January and February 1990, or excuse me, 2021. So
Mhm.
it's a couple of years old.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that Korea game. I got my ass handed to me. Got stuck in that valley, and there was nothing I could do. So
It's like 1 to 2,000 is technically the scale. It's virtual minis because at 1 to 2,000, I don't even know how many. Like that's like a third of a millimeter as far as scale goes. It's really
mhm.
really small. But each inch was like 50 meters or something like that.
Mhm.
So the way the virtual miniatures or playing pieces, whatever you want to call it, were designed was you would have like the little tank, but of course the tank isn't really that size. It'd be like the size of a one of those German rats you read about. But there's a little blue dot that indicates where the tank really is, and then these little arcs. So there's no argument about arc. Because yeah, if an inch is 50 meters, then a tank is like very very small, like a
Mhm.
quarter of an inch, not even an eighth of an inch, including the barrel. So you would never be able to honestly, hey, wait a minute, is that a flank shot? Is that not a flank shot? We tracked ammunition, we tracked command levels, we tracked gunner skills. It wasn't nearly the size of Team Yankee. Like you would want to put maybe a platoon versus a Soviet company or something like that. Total of 15 tanks on the table between both sides, and that's a big game. But yeah, it was an attempt to do like a more detailed or take a more detailed look at modern or ultra modern armored warfare in a wargaming setting.
Yeah. No, I thought it went very well. I thought the game was good. I had fun. Even though I got my butt handed to me, I thought it was fun. Damon asks, wasn't shoot the aerials a NATO standard as well?
Yeah, we're talking about shooting at Soviet tanks with radio antenna. All Russian tanks have had radios since more or less 1943, but the commander might have additional antenna. So with Russians, also Russians are so rigid, or I should say Soviets, um, in like the 60s, 70s, and 80s, were usually pretty rigid in their like field deployments. Like there's the three platoons of three. Where's the guy in the back of those three? He's probably the company commander.
Mhm.
You'd be able to tell like that. I mean, NATO's armor formations were usually trained, not to be quite so obvious. In, I mean, never mind looking at the letters or the numbers on the tank, or how many radio antenna it has, or its EM signature, or anything like that. Just, bro, you're 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 behind this triple wedge of three platoons of three. It might, be a little obvious as far as who the company commander is.
Sure. Sure. And to answer Tuffy Year's question about homework, a few shows ago, she mentioned, oh, what's the
Oh
name?
yeah, we're supposed to
Um,
watch a movie.
yes. Unfortunately, I have not had a chance to do that yet. I promise I will get it in, and I will do a full report for you, Tuffy Years.
In tough
Um,
years, I'm on vacation, so
so yeah. Um, which leads me to another interesting question, Jim. As we sit here and we talk about Team Yankee, I loved the boot camp. It was fun, and I think that's where you and I officially met, right?
physically met. Yeah,
Yeah. Um, I
that
mean, it was
sounded
very
weird.
well supported, and everybody was there, and we had fun, and people got to blow up tanks, and the tables looked awesome. We.
I still remember the interview you did with me and Bruce Lee.
Oh yeah.
You were asking, why, Jim? Why did you pick the Russians? I was like, six Hind gunships. Yeah, but
Right.
six Hind gunships. Then you went over. Okay, I can't get any answer out of him. Let me talk to Andrew. He's like, Bruce, why did you pick the right? He's honestly the exact same reason.
Exactly. Yeah, Hind gunships, and I think the Americans had Cobras, right? If I'm not
Yeah, but
mistaken.
only like two of them.
Um, yeah. So
It was
yeah,
just the way
no,
the way
that was
It's just the way that the packs were. I was like, yeah, I'll take 6, and they were like true one to 115 mil. So a Hein is like, including the rotors, it
Yeah,
was like
they were
almost that.
huge.
You had 6
Yeah.
of them. You couldn't even set them up on a 4x4 table. The rotors are all like interlocking. You're like, how are they flying like that? They're at different altitudes or something. You make up some kind of bullshit
Yeah.
reason.
Right. So, yeah, it was a good time. So, my question to you, Jim, is you have played multitude of rule sets for miniature based gaming. So let's keep it in the modernish,
Yeah.
80s. We can say any era, Cold War era on up. What would be your go-to miniatures based rule set?
Oh, it's been pretty obvious. The only determination factor in the question is this more of a tank game or more of an infantry game? Like, what's the group in the mood for? If we're doing
Hmm.
tanks, it's 7 days to the River Rhine.
Okay.
Full stop. Um, it takes a lot of what we see in other rule sets and it kind of fixes it. And for infantry, it's still force on force, and I stress first edition because I hear a second edition has come out, and
Yeah. I haven't heard anything about second
I've heard a
edition.
few
Is it
things.
actually out
I've
now?
heard a few things about. People are playing it. I know that
Okay.
people are playing
Okay.
it enough to complain about it, and
Uh-oh.
I'm listening to it, and it sounds like they streamlined some of the rules, and maybe some of the rules are almost streamlined a little too much.
Mm,
Like some stuff
okay.
got like not even like certain units, but like certain tactics got nerfed. Things like Overwatch and Ambush. I haven't played the game myself, so I reserve judgment. But some of my friends who tried Force on Force are like they still play it. They're just using this, like once in a while they'll just kind of bring in an old first edition rule and use it for some things that
Gotcha.
change that they may not have liked. But
Mm,
first edition Force on Force, Ambush Alley Games cooperating with Osprey Publishing, absolutely. And again, if it's any kind of vehicle or tank heavy game, um, 7 Days to the River Rhine by Great Escape Games. Introduced to me by Piotr. He's like, hey, because Piotr and I used to like to, bitch about other games all the time, especially offline when the cameras aren't on. And he's like, hey, I
mhm.
think I found something that kind of fixes that. And sure enough,
Interesting. Okay. Excellent.
my favorite thing about 7 Days to the River Rhine
Yeah.
is that it's a simple game. I mean, it's knowingly savvy, kind of almost cagily simple. Like the guys who came out with 7 Days to the River Rhine are like, look, everyone likes to bolt on because it's most war gamers are old, 40 and 50-year-old, vet bros or whatever. When it comes to modern war gaming, a lot of them are, and they all know
Mhm.
better than everybody else because I was actually in. What branch did you serve in? So when a war game rule comes out, they're going to dump in all their, how we did it in our day kind of special rules or whatever.
Right.
And a game that is already like a complete, probably overcomplicated rule set, and you start dumping additional rules on top of that, it's going to get unstable. It's going to fall apart. 7 Days to the River Rhine, some people say like it's almost too simple. It's like a bare slab of concrete. This is a tank. It has tracks on both sides. There's this little pew pew gun thing that spins around the turret. But they know, and if you go to like their Facebook community, like people are coming out with their own lists, their own rules, their own tactical advantage cards. There's special things for different NATO armies. There's a thing in there for the Yom Kippur War. There's things in there for all kinds of different lists. It starts out as the classic, oh wow, here we go again, 1985, the Soviets are invading Germany kind of thing. But there are people building lists and armies and rule addendums for everything between Korea and certain wars that might happen in the future, and all over the place. So
Sure.
it's a very community friendly game, to be sure.
Awesome. So I might use that rule set instead of Team Yankee to do these guys. So I picked it up. I just haven't had a chance to read through it.
Oh, it's
Um,
very simple. Some people, like, if you just read the book, you'd be like, oh, this is almost too simple.
mhm.
Like, there's only 3 speeds in the game. Tanks don't have their own speeds. There's infantry, vehicle, and fast vehicle. It's like literally that simple.
Oh,
But it knows that people are going to add their own rules on top of that. And if you just go, I just search like in Facebook, 7 Days to the River Rhine. Not 7 Days to the Rhine. That's a hex and counter game on the operational scale. 7 Days to the River Rhine. They added that river in there just to distinguish it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you'll see that the community, like, the little files section under their Facebook group, there's like a whole library of additional resources that the community's put together. They play test against each other. Great communication, great discussion. It's a very, like I said, a very community friendly game.
Awesome. Speaking of rules, I have been sent a copy of, I believe it's the alpha or beta version of the second edition of Skirmish Sangan.
Oh, cool.
So he asked me to give it a read through and do some test play, which I will do. I need some miniatures. I don't have any miniatures anymore. So, but that will segue into our news because there's actually some miniatures I wanted to show off. I do have some news items. So why don't we cut over to some news pages first? And that will lead us into some other things. So let me share a screen here. And I'm going to share a tab. So the first thing we're going to talk about is this. So let me get up to the top. This is from the Charge blog from Michael Charge. He created a little flow chart, if you guys are into flow charts, about how Spectre miniatures and Spectre operations, the rule set, and asymmetrical warfare became. Back in the day, the original Spectre miniatures was a Kickstarter by Stephen May, and then it developed into a rule set, and he created the rules, and then eventually he brought in Matt Adams to help define the rules. Matt is a career British military officer who now, basically, for lack of better words, consultant, military consultant to everywhere in the world, essentially. So they created Spectre rules. A second edition had come out, and then Matt, due to work and life, stepped away from Spectre. And then somewhere along the line, he felt that he could create a rule set too. So he created asymmetrical warfare. So this kind of explains that. Let me move on to the next one I want to show y'all in the news. And this is Plastic Soldier Company. And I don't know why it's showing that page, but let's see if I get it to come up here. So there's like the British Vickers machine guns. So these are all the new releases from there. They have the 8th Army British. 8th Army was in Africa, right, Jim? Correct?
Yeah, 8th Africa, later Sicily, later Italy. Although
And then they have
a lot of the units in 8th Army bounce around between different corps and army groups. Like when you're thinking 8th Army, a lot of people think like Desert Rats, 7th Armored Division.
Mm-hmm.
They get moved around between, like, they're all in 21st Army Group. They're in 30 Corps. They're in the war up in, Northwest Europe and Holland and all that stuff like that. So the men of 8th Army are literally all over the place, but officially the 8th Army is in, North Africa, Sicily, and Italy.
Awesome. So they have some new releases. There's a mortar team. Looks good. And then
I've got a lot of 15 millimeter PSC infantry. They make really good kits, and you get a lot for it.
Yeah. I wanted to show the Romans. I do love me some Romans. So there's some veteran Roman troops. So they've come out with a whole bunch of kits for the rule set, Mortem Glorium, I believe it's how it's pronounced. So they have quite a bit. So you can even get a late Roman starter army for 56 pounds or 66 pounds. That's a lot of guys for 66 pounds. So very nice. Plastic Soldier Company. And PSC is the ones that actually had come out with.
Wait a minute. Where's the which product were we just looking at?
The 15 millimeter late Romans here. See them? Let me.
That's like $80.
Yeah.
Huh. And what scale is that? 15. I wonder if that's a typo. No, it couldn't be. Never mind. So I bought like a box of it's like $20 late war British infantry. It had 144 guys in the box, and that was
that from Plastic Soldier
totally,
Company or like Vitrix?
Most of my Oh, Plastic Soldier Company. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's 110 figures. Got to remember, prices have gone up.
Yeah.
Plastic's gone up. Shipping's gone up. So yeah, you can get quite a bit of Russian troops
A
there.
lot of the other ones where it's like 18 pounds or 350 is a different set, but
Yeah.
okay, I guess that's just smaller numbers of guys. I see.
Yeah. So here's 15 millimeter late Roman cataphracts, 18
Yeah,
pounds, so roughly $22.
Cataphracts is basically heavy armored cavalry, um, 3rd century and back. So late Roman cataphracts, these are more like a cavalry inspired by cataphracts, but yeah, basically heavy
Gotcha.
armored cavalry.
Okay. So there's quite a bit there. So if you're looking for some, you know, the early wars, then, there you go. All right, moving on. Speaking of Spectre miniatures, let me share that screen. They have come out with different minis, and there's the Spook limited collectible.
What's he doing there?
That's pretty awesome. They do have a new rule set coming out. I think it's released, and they're going to be PDF. So this is, I believe, the 3rd edition. Yes, this is version 3 that's coming out. So they've enhanced and refined and all that good stuff. So that will be coming out here shortly from Spectre. But that the Spook, the limited collectible, that's pretty
He's
cool.
literally ready for ghost ops.
True that. So, yeah, they have some nice minis. They have
I
some
like
really
the
nice
civilians.
minis. Yeah, they've always had really good civilians. I actually had ordered their HVTs,
Yep.
their high value targets. They were basically plays on world leaders at the time. So, you could use them for what they were. So that's Spectre doing really good.
So
Let's see.
the Trump figure had like his own special of orange paint that came with him. You would have to. Nobody ever has been this color before, so we're including the paint because it's kind of strange.
All right, moving on. Speaking of asymmetrical warfare, it's been released. You can buy it through Drive-Thru RPG. It's literally $12.
Yeah, I think I've seen this on Facebook, but I didn't really investigate into it.
Yeah, so he has created his own version of a modern rule set. And the nice thing about this one is that a percentage of the proceeds goes to veteran charities.
Oh, hell yeah.
So,
that's pretty good.
yeah. So I'll be buying this, and
yeah,
again,
let me know.
I
I don't want to judge a book by its cover, but simply by its name, again, which is no indication really. Way too many modern rule sets are not really asymmetrical. They put tier 1 operators versus tier 1 operators, and I'm sure that's fun, and I'm sure once in a while it happens. But we were asking before, like the best or my favorite, a modern miniature set for infantry battles. It's always force on force, because maybe asymmetrical warfare will be number 2, but or be a second one. But for now, force on force, at least in my experience, again, I never played Skirmish Sanguine, so I could be wrong about this. It was the first game that I found that actually knew what asymmetrical warfare really meant. Like, there's literally 2 rule books in the book, in the 2 sides. Like when I'm running it at the club, I warn everybody in advance, this game is not fair, and it's asymmetrical. So you guys over here playing the Marines, what you're doing, okay, don't look at something that your opponent does and then say, okay, I want to use that rule, I want to do that. I'm like, no, you can't. It's illegal for you, it's legal for him, and vice versa. That you're literally playing 2 different rule sets. And the winner is the guy who makes the opponent play his game, which is, Vietnam in a nutshell, both Afghanistan's in a nutshell. It's Iraq, it's Somalia. It's, the guy who makes it his war is the one who's going to win.
Yeah. No, very true. Very true. So I will get a download of that and go through it. But again, I don't have minis, which leads me to the next one and our final item for today. And this is from In Country. They have STL packs. So you can download and print, if you have a printer, your own minis. So, I'll be able to use these. And there's a ton of other miniature companies out there. And then there's some covert kill teams, but they have quite a bit.
I like that one guy had a breaching shotgun.
Yeah.
To get through the door. I don't think it was in the slide. It was in one of the slides. It looked like maybe I wasn't looking at it closely. I could have sworn I saw like a breaching shotgun, like one of those like Ithaca M870s, like the cops use.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
I might have not been looking at it right. Okay, never mind. Sorry.
That's okay. I mean, and then like I said, they have basically you become a supporter. There's like a Patreon type thing, and then every month they release a new pack. Like here, you get some, lack of a better word, some terrorist type dudes.
Ski masks and AKMs.
Yeah.
There you go.
If you carry an AK and wear a mask, you're a terrorist.
It's a classic look. I think it's very great for the fall season. Some things just never go out of style, Bill. Some things just never go out of style.
Oh my goodness. There's a hazmat team.
I like those douchekas we saw a second ago. You can never have enough douchekas.
You want to see that?
There you go.
Let me bring that up for you.
Yeah, that's how I recognize it. You can't. Oh, and 50s too.
Yeah.
Wow, he's got miniguns. He's got looks like a Mark 19 in there, or maybe that's some kind of
possibly giving Mark. Yeah, it looks like a Mark 19, and then you got a.
No, it's you know what it is? It's a the shorter jacket for the M2. Like there's almost two Maul Deuces on there. I guess you put the barrel.
Yeah.
I don't know. No, because the charging handle's different. That probably is a Mark 19. Never mind.
Yeah, that looks like a Mark 19. But yeah, I mean, so if you're looking for minis and if you have a good printer, Frogmen. I know what these Frogmen. Do you know where these Frogmen are from? Which country?
With the little
the veils
bags over their head. No.
They're Danish.
Nice.
I actually read and saw a video about the Danish Special Forces SEALs, whatever they're called, but they're frogmen. They wear these hoods, these veils. That's like their thing.
Their trademark.
Yeah, see, it says Danish frogmen
cool.
right there. Yeah. And then, again, so there's all kinds of miniatures here for. Isn't that the Russian 50 cal rifle there? That big fat thing?
Either that or one of those automatic close assault shotguns. Yeah. I'm not really familiar with those kind of weapons, but yeah, something. It's got definitely a huge barrel on it.
Yeah. So, but there are some of the options you can get with SWAT teams, veteran insurgents.
Nice little riot shield on that one SWAT guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And they pride themselves on their detail.
Yeah, you can tell like that's not just like an AK, that's an AKM. You see that little shovel type muzzle brake there on the very front. It's like you can tell like in a miniature, if you can tell what caliber the AK is, it's definitely one of the old 7.62s, not one of the new 5.45s.
Nice. So there you go. That is what I had in the news for new releases. So I will have to see if I can get some of these guys ordered up. I don't have a printer anymore. I'm either have to buy one or see if Chris can print them for me. Tough years, that's what she said. So, all right, let's transition into our topic. What is the best era of wargaming? Now, it's a twofold question. What it was the best era to play or wargame in, and the second side, the B side, if you will, is what was the best era for wargaming? Meaning, was it the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, 2000s? So I'll let you go first, sir.
Oh, man. I know everyone's expecting me to say like the late 70s. As far as the best era of wargaming's history. That's when like a lot of really great games were coming out. Avalon Hill was huge. SSI was just getting started.
Mhm.
Victory Games was still kind of a
Yeah.
division of Avalon Hill, but I mean, and it wasn't just because Page Leader, because I mean, yeah, that was a big part of it, but probably the game that eventually knocked back Panzer Leader off the hill was Advanced Squad Leader, and Advanced Squad Leader. That was just getting started.
Yeah.
And Victory Games was going into like James Bond games, like they came up with a different module for every movie. So I mean, there was a lot of really fun stuff. Steve Jackson was just getting started with Car Wars,
Mhm.
and some of that stuff. People were kind of complaining, but because it was like drawing attention away from wargaming, I thought it just brought in a whole bunch of new people. I know that sounds very egalitarian, but um, TSR had just bought Dragon Quest and pretty much chopped it up and turned it into the beginnings of what we call D&D. So a lot of really big and influential stuff that was going to kind of echo through the future decades kind of got started in the 70s.
Mhm.
All that said, there was no internet. So
Yeah.
honestly, I would say almost a split between the late 1970s and honestly right now. Um, because a lot of new rule sets are out there. People can kind of design their own rule sets, publish them themselves. I'm going to be working with Mark Ritchie on helping him publish his actual war game set, Tactical Combat. We've
Nice.
seen it 100 times, not 100, but
Mhm.
we've seen it at least 20 times here on the Sit Rep podcast. And people keep asking, "Where's this rule set?" And he's got it written down. It's almost like Dark Star was for me, a couple years ago. And
Mhm.
we just got to put it together in such a way where it's able to be published. It's also like Valor and Victory Modern Expansion, modern Valor and Victory by Barry Doyle, and then I was tinkering around with a modern version of it for 3 or 4 years, and finally said, "Look, somebody write these rules down." So I reached out to Barry Doyle. I said, "I'm going to publish this on Board Game Geek if you're cool with it, because it's your game." And yeah, his basic attitude was, I sent him like the first draft, and he was like, "This is awesome. In fact, if anything, you're taking something off my plate, because I was meaning to do this, but he was trying to get into other projects."
Sure.
But the point is, sooner or later you have to sit down and actually write the rules. There's a lot more of that now. We're in the age of desktop publishing. Um, like a lot of people say, "Oh, it's 3D printing," and honestly, even though I'm not into 3D printing, 3D printing is a big thing.
Mhm.
You can almost make your own miniatures. You can custom design your own miniatures in some ways. I'm not really an expert in that field, but anything that puts more power into the or more creativity into the hands of the consumer, that might not be the most market friendly thing to say, but honestly, it's about the community first, and the community's got more options now between desktop publishing, tabletop printing, and availability of rule sets. So yeah, to wrap up, between the 1970s and now, I'm honestly kind of split as far as like if I had to pick like an actual era, like which one would would,
Mhm.
would be better.
Okay. All right. For war game. What's the best era to war game?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I know what my favorites are. They're not always the most popular. I guess World
Yeah.
War II is pretty popular. My favorite is probably moderns. But if I was going to be more objective about it, I would almost say like Black Powder, because
Yeah.
Black Powder is the era where it's close enough to be somewhat relatable, and at the same time, anything with Black Powder, i.e., before the invention of like smokeless powder, which is it just burns much more efficiently. That's where your ranges come in. The average
Mhm.
engagement range in the Civil War going back is like what, 300 yards. So you could actually stage a big game on a table, have it look visually amazing, and at the same time almost tactically approximate. Um, People put tanks on the table, or anything after the invention of smokeless gunpowder. So pretty much 1900 forward, and it might look amazing to some people, but I just can't. And it's not to bash on anyone's system, but it's, oh, this I like to play tabletop miniature wargaming because it looks better. I'm like, it really doesn't, because these tanks should be 40 feet apart on your 15 millimeter table, um, and they don't. So I already have to kind of close one eye and tilt my head sideways when looking at anybody's miniature table. I don't care how nice your buildings are, your trees. Um, But with black powder, you don't really have that problem. So I would almost, if you wanted to go with miniatures, I would almost go with something in the black powder era. It's not my favorite, but to be objective, yeah, that's what I would go with.
I would agree with you. Because if you think about it, black powder, that's going to give you the American War for Independence. It's going to give you 1812. It'll give you Civil War, Napoleonics, up to the Zulu War. Well, was that considered smokeless powder?
They had
I mean, they
closed
were
cartridges,
bullets, cases. So, I mean, screw it. Anything up to 1900, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Or even thereabouts. Like they didn't have smokeless gunpowder in the big battleship shells like the Battle of Tsushima, 1904, 1905, the Russo-Japanese
mhm,
War. So yeah, like say pre-World War I.
yeah. Because if you think about it, it's the most visually appealing uh, era. You've got, I mean, just look at the Napoleonics. I know we've talked about it before, but if you pull up a painting guide for the armies of the Napoleonic Wars, you've got, it's essentially the European war, right? It was the continent of Europe was in war because pretty much any of the major countries during that time period had an army fighting in those
Oh,
battles.
the
Um,
Napoleonic Wars is
yeah,
basically the real World War II. The
yeah.
real World War I being
So
the 7 Years' War. Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, you've got pretty much any color on the spectrum you'll be able to paint your military with. I mean, there was green uniforms, blue uniforms, red uniforms, so on and so on and so on.
It's the one
So
it's
if
the
you,
one thing that Napoleonics has over American Civil War. American Civil War, it's not completely monochromatic, but it's pretty close.
yeah. So, I just, it still blows my mind that those guys just stood in a line face to face and go, shoot me, and then I'm going to shoot you,
Um,
and we'll see who gets hit.
you be there's two big reasons for that. Yeah. And the reason a lot of people kind of think that is because we've seen way too many movies where they reflect almost like modern day casualty rates. I always threaten I'm going to do this. One of these days I'm going to do this. Where like in the Patriot, the two lines line up against each other, and then
Mhm.
the British officer drops his sword and he says fire, and they open fire. And I'm going to cut to the MG-42 on Omaha Beach from Saving Private Ryan because the number of guys that fall out of the Continental Line um, is just absurd. And when you look at it like that, yeah, it's absurd for guys to just line up on these blocks. Well, three things. Number one, you could do that at 100 yards and get away with it. Those 100 guys across from you, 100 meters away, would fire, and maybe two of your guys would fall. I mean,
Mhm.
have you ever played paintball? It's basically that. You actually see the bullet corkscrew spin. Good luck hitting anything. Which leads to the second thing. The reason they lined up in those very tight blocks, it was the only way to possibly manage even an iota of applicable firepower and have them all fire at once. Two
Right.
armies just kind of like skirmishing at each other for everything we like to say about the American riflemen in the American Revolution. You could shoot at each other all day and like literally kill almost no one. Our losses at the Battle of Cowpens, 12 killed, or Cowpens, I should say, 12 killed and like less than 100 wounded. Um,
Mhm.
and that was like 12 hours of fighting. Like one guy died per hour. That's how absurdly inaccurate the weapons were. And number two, or I should say number three, it was the only way to control men at that time. There's no radios. There's no, even flags, drums, flutes, stuff like that don't work. There's too much noise. There's too much smoke. So the only way to actually manage an army in those days was to put them all in a tight little group, put a guy with a brightly colored hat and a huge flag, and maybe your guys would be able to follow basic instructions. So it's the only way to control an army. It was the only way to apply firepower. And yeah, given the technology of the day, it was really, you could kind of get away with it. Now that
Mhm.
pendulum definitely swings. Some people say the Crimean War. I'd say it definitely started in the Crimean War, 1850, 1853. By the time we get to the American Civil War, technology has advanced in some very small ways. I've actually got some here, some recovered Manet balls from an American Civil War
Oh,
battlefield.
wow.
Yeah, and these are actual bullets from that war that someone dug out of the ground and like sold in out of a out of a museum shop. And as you saw, it wasn't a round ball. It's an actual bullet-shaped bullet, and the back of
Hmm.
it is concave. The back of it is hollow, and the idea being when the bullet fires or when the charge fires, it's still a black powder muzzle loading weapon. But when it fires, that metal expands just enough to where it now fills to an airtight. Like today's technology, today's manufacturing wasn't around back then.
Right.
Nowadays, you put a bullet in a breech and you expect it to actually fit perfectly into the. It wasn't like that back then. They didn't have those kind of manufacturings. But now the bullet would actually expand a little bit, actually fill the barrel properly. You get like that almost airtight seal. And now it actually leaves the muzzle with a decent amount of velocity. Tiny little things like that. You now had rifled bullets, you had or rifled barrels that had actually fit the bullet. Strange,
Hmm.
wild idea there. Have the bullet and your gun be the same size. And now your range just went up to 600 yards. So yeah, you see like Napoleonic casualty rates, Crimean War casualty rates, American Civil War casualty rates go through the friggin' roof because the technology has taken just that one pace forward, and technology is always one step ahead of tactics. And it's like, oh, what we used to do in Napoleonic terms doesn't work anymore. But
Right.
to your point, previously to set up an army like that really did actually make a weird kind of sense.
Well, that makes sense now that you've explained
I
it.
mean, once it
Like,
didn't, it really didn't. And you get battles like
yeah.
Shiloh, you get battles like Second Manassas, Big Gettysburg, Antietam, still the bloodiest day in American history. I mean, by far. So once it didn't make sense, it didn't make sense. But
Yeah.
it happens again in World War One. Oh, we can maneuver like this in front of enemy entrenchments. Now, see, there's this thing called the machine gun now. Yeah, breech loading
Yeah. Right.
artillery. You might want to rethink your tactics.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like the point you made that technology is ahead of tactics. So we're always adjusting to technology. It's never the opposite as far as I'm concerned.
No, and that's just
Um,
because of the way the military is set up. The military is set up in such a way, like like you know, God knows, better than most. Um, the military is not like other professions, where we're always trying new synergies and looking to the future. The military is like, look, in our job,
mhm.
if you have a bad day at work, you didn't spill coffee on your keyboard. Your best friend just got his, pancreas blown out by a mortar shell and he died in
Mm.
your arms screaming for his parents. Our job's a little bit more serious than most people's jobs, so we stick to what works. The military is much more hidebound. The people who are writing the field manuals, the technical manuals, the guys who are establishing the doctrines, are sergeant majors and generals who have been in for 30 years. So it kind of sucks to say, but when it comes to technology versus, especially in recent centuries, technology versus tactics, yeah, technology is always at least half a step ahead. And when that's more pronounced, yeah,
Yeah.
you've got ridiculous casualty rates. Is the symptom of that? You can always tell when, like just reading through history, when is
Mhm.
technology really ahead of tactics? Look at the casualty rates. The casualty
Yeah.
rates are really, really high, and the battlefield's not moving anywhere. Like trench warfare in World War One, that's technology is ahead of tactics. When tactics are ahead of technology, or even close, that's when you get wars like World War Two, where okay, the casualties are higher because the battles are bigger, but percentage-wise, the casualty rates are actually much lower in World War Two than World War One, and more
Yeah.
importantly, there's a lot more movement.
Yeah.
People are actually getting shit done. Um, that's just war's not supposed to stand in one place for an extended period of time. You're supposed to be moving toward an objective. You're supposed to be going somewhere, and
Right.
that's when you see that in different conflicts.
Most definitely. Um, Damon made an excellent point about late 19th century muzzle velocity and penetration. So, yeah.
Yeah, he's absolutely right, and it's a, a series of technological improvements. I'm just familiar with the Minet ball because I'm an American, so American Civil War. But you've got like the Prussian needle gun, that you saw in the Austro-Prussian Wars. Then you get like your first real breech loaders, like you see like the Henry Martini rifle in the Zulu Wars and
Hmm.
stuff like that. The Indian Wars out west, and yeah, once the engagement ranges, anyone who plays Panzer Leader will be able to tell you this. It's not how powerful the gun is. Who cares how big your bullet is? A 9mm will kill you just as fast as a 50 cal.
Right.
It's how far that sucker's going to reach, and tactically how long you're going to have to be running before you can cross that open ground. If he can engage you at 1,000 meters, like let's just bring it back to wargaming terms. If the enemy can engage you at 1,000 meters, you're now spending 3 movement phases under opportunity fire. If his gun can only reach 100 meters, you've only got to pass
Hmm.
through one. And even if
Yeah.
each one kills 50% of your guys, okay, well, it's going to be a bloody charge, but you can get through one movement phase. If you got to get through 3 movement phases, 50 times 50 times 50, you're down to 12% of your people. Your casualty rate just tripled, or actually, no,
Yeah.
quadrupled. So it's, yeah. And it's the range. Like you play early war Panzer leader, and it's like almost a breath of fresh air. And no one's gun shoots further than 3 hexes. And you're just like doing these ballet moves. Oh, I feel like Guderian. Look at these bold flanking maneuvers I can do. Yeah, try that shit in 44. The guns all, I mean, yes, the guns are more powerful, but so is everyone's armor. Everyone's armor is thicker. So that delta
Yeah.
never really changes. What changes out of all proportion is the range. You try that stuff in 44, 45, and somebody with an 88 or a 17 pounder is going to take your head off from, 3 miles away. It's crazy.
Hmm.
It's all about the range.
Exactly. So the second part of my response to the topic today is the best era, the best era for war gaming
The
to
the
play
the,
it,
the, the publishing era, right?
the publishing era. And I agree with you 100%. It's the 70s into the early 80s. Before I get into examples, because you've pretty much made them all, but 70s into the early 80s, mid 80s to mid 90s was a desert for wargaming in a lot of
The
ways.
computer took over.
Yeah.
The personal computer wrecked a lot. The personal computer took away a lot of the players, but the personal computer wasn't advanced enough to actually take the place. Like Harpoon, it pretty much sank games like Harpoon, but Harpoon on PC didn't come out until like 92, I think. So, yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Tuffier says the American Civil War, the English had at least a dozen civil wars before the colony put their oar in on the trend. I agree. I mean, England had a lot of, I guess you could call them civil wars.
Well, there's
They
the
were
one
fighting for
actual English Civil War. Then there's
right.
the Barons' War, the War of the Roses.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd call that a brag. I mean, that's kind of a weird flex. Our country has devoured itself more times than yours has. Yeah. Okay, you win. But yeah, obviously, English history, British history. Well, British history, then English history, and before that, who knows?
Hmm.
That's definitely a lot longer than ours. I mean, sure.
Yeah, most definitely. But getting back to our topic, so yeah, I mean, if you look at it, late 60s, you had Avalon Hill coming on the scene, with Tactics 2. And then, from there, you had Panzer Blitz and Panzer Leader and so on. They had such an extensive catalog back in the 70s and early 80s. And the thing about Avalon Hill is you could go into any bookstore and buy their games. They were on the shelf.
Right.
Remember the bookcase games? I mean, you had
Absolutely.
several of them.
Yep.
You could go into the predecessor of Borders and Barnes and Noble and go into those bookstores. And if you went back, you could find a shelf that had Avalon Hill games on it.
Yeah, like
You
Walden
know,
Books used to have like their own little section.
yeah,
Yeah.
Walden Books. Yep. Used to love going to Walden Books. So yeah,
And that's why like we've had the discussion before about like what's your favorite game? Why is it historically being like publishing wise historically? And I always mention Panzer Leader is people were playing tactical war games before that in church basements, those weird guys that no one else liked to talk to. Um, it was a very very almost underground kind of a thing. Games like Avalon or game companies like Avalon Hill. There were others, so I'll say like Avalon Hill, were the
mhm,
ones that came out and said like, look, this is a normal thing. You can buy this for $10 in those days, and you could theoretically still be playing it today.
yeah,
Really
yeah,
brought it into the mainstream.
exactly. And then unfortunately, yeah, the computer kind of created the downfall of Avalon Hill, and, they had a few digital versions of some of their games. They were never very good, truly, I don't think. That's my personal
No,
opinion.
you're right. Yeah. It
Um,
in like the mid '80s, computer gaming was like, whoa, like console, like the Atari 2600 was coming out, the Commodore
yeah.
64, the Commodore 128. This is turning into a retro gaming stream here. Don't
Nothing wrong with that.
don't sue us, Marty. By the way, quick aside, if anyone's ever into like that kind of like '80s computer and console gaming, the Hobby Lodge is a YouTube channel. My friend, I'm sure you've met him, Martin Russell in the
Yeah,
UK. Yeah, great channel. A big supporter of our. He was in our Aliens game for like last Halloween, I think it was. Big
nice.
supporter. But yeah, those games came out in the '80s. Like those platforms were really getting going, and not to trash talk Avalon Hill, but Avalon Hill by then had a lot of competition. Victory Games,
Mhm,
SSI, SPI, a lot of this stuff was coming out. There was a lot of competition. Also, Avalon Hill games were getting too complicated. The players always wanted more, more, and more detail. Avalon, I should say, Advanced Squad Leader by the mid '80s was absolutely out of control. No, it was, and
yeah,
I'll die on that hill. It was ASL was just completely bonkers by that point.
yeah.
And now comes this fun game with pretty colors that you don't have to like have a college degree just to get through the friggin' rule book or whatever. Okay, cool. So everyone naturally shifted over to that. Now later in the '90s, the computer itself would advance to the point where you could play war games on a computer. But yeah,
Mhm,
like '85 to '92 is like this weird kind of middle ground, kind of no man's land, dead space where, yeah, you're absolutely right. It kind of torpedoed not completely, but a lot of the wargaming market. I was really into FASA in those days, Renegade
mhm,
Legions, BattleTech, which isn't really
yeah,
historical. So the games still were kind of around, but yeah, they absolutely did take a huge hit.
yeah. Yeah, they did. Um, and I remember playing by mail. Do you remember play by mail
I never
for some of your
tried it,
games?
but I know people who did. I never had the
And
patience
talk
for it.
about a game lasting forever and a day,
You have to
you know?
like pick a company, um, like I don't know, a random like company on the New York Stock Exchange, and watch their stock price, and that was your die roll. Because I mean, what are you gonna do? Roll a peg, take a Polaroid of it, and put it in the mailbox in
Right,
your like no email, lick a stamp, close the envelope,
exactly.
drop it in the mailbox.
And wait a week or 2 until you get a response. Yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, I truly, to me, this personally, because, the golden age was the '70s into the early '80s. I mean, TSR was big then, with
They were just
Dungeons& and
getting started. They were
Dragons
like
and
on first edition D&D.
yeah, and, they even had war games. They had, what was the Desert War
Oh,
one
the very
by
first one,
TSR?
Line in the Sand,
Yeah, so
came out in
and then
1991. Came out the same year the war did.
yeah.
I remember I walked into a gaming store in Orlando, Florida, and I saw that, and I was like, "This is kind of weird." Like, it's probably one of the first times in my life I felt old. I was like 19 at the time, and I was like, "There's a war game for the conflict I was in for." Oh no, I'm officially an old man now. I'm in the historical wargaming section.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, now is another, I would say, the second age, golden age of wargaming, because you can do things like you do, Jim, on the computer to the worldwide audience.
Oh
You can
yeah.
take Panzer Blitz, Panzer Leader, Arab-Israeli wars, digitize it, and it still blows my mind that you do it in Excel versus, if you look at the comments on some of your videos, I think somebody recently asked if you're doing it in Tabletop
Oh,
Simulator
it's always that. It's like,
or
are you doing this in Vassal? Are you doing this on
yeah,
tabletop RPG
yeah,
or D20 or something? It's like, so.
yeah. So,
I do it in Excel just because I'm kind of a luddite, and it's the secret sauce to that system is just creating all the assets ahead of time. So there's nothing advanced in Excel. Like, how do you do that in Excel? The real magic is, or not magic, but the real grunt work is doing it in Photoshop. For
mhm,
every hour of Excel content that goes out there, there's 3 hours of Photoshop. Um, and then after that, it's just there's this little thing called insert image, and you grab it out of your folder and you put it in there, and then it's just making sure which alert's on top. Now you can't roll dice that way. Like Excel, people hear Excel and they think that the Excel is running the game from a math perspective. It isn't. It's just a collection of images. You could
Hmm.
actually do it in PowerPoint if you wanted to. I mean, it wouldn't look as good, but you could technically
Yeah.
do it in PowerPoint.
Yeah.
But the reason I do is because I feel that, especially the kind of games I run old crunchy games. People still like to pick up plastic dice. They don't want to hit a
Hmm.
button on a dice app. So they wouldn't want Excel to roll the dice and actually interpret the rules for them. They just want to show it. It's a way to visually represent the map board and broadcast it to people so everyone can see it. And there you go.
There you go.
But you're still picking
Yeah.
up your own dice. Okay, there's a little webcam on your dice tray, so you know there's no we're on the honor system anyway.
Yeah.
It's easy.
Yeah. So yeah, I think now has elevated wargaming to a different level, obviously, and made it more accessible to the general public, if you will. Because it's now available to be digitized, and the setup isn't as. I mean, outside of your creation, Photoshop, and all that, for an average player to come in, you can set it up pretty easily without having to go through and sort counters.
Oh
Remember
yeah.
back in the day, you'd get like a game of Panzer Lead, or somebody would just throw them in a baggie, and then you have to go and sort for hours to make sure you have the right
Or if you
counters.
were
You
hardcore,
you probably had the organizational trays, Jim. I'm gonna go with you. Probably had the
I never
trays.
had the trays. I never liked the trays because the trays would spill. But I would have little baggies.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Panzer Leader, I had like 15 baggies in there, and it looked like I was, rolling drugs or something. I had like tiny little plastic baggies. Um, but oh, I can forget what I was going to say now. Yeah, keep going. 'Cause I totally just lost my thought.
But I mean, it kind of takes out that part. But in some
Oh
ways,
yeah, if
I
you were
kind of
real,
miss that
I apologize.
experience.
If you were really
No, go ahead.
hardcore, you invited your friends over for a counter clipping party.
Oh, you're a counter clipper?
You have to. Yeah, well, back in those days, you had to because the counters back then were atrocious.
I
Nowadays,
have
no,
never.
because the way that I don't know if they use like a laser or something. The counters
Uh,
when you punch a sheet, it just comes out of there. They're perfect. But back in the day, man, you had these gigantic hanging chads and on the corners, and if you
yep.
had an actual game going, like I was really worse, you would have a stack of counters like that high in a hex. There's
Yeah.
4 units in the hex. Some of them are carrying infantry. There's unit function markers in there. There's ammunition load markers in there. There's dispersed. You could have like almost looks like a little miniature poker stack. You got 3 or 4 of these close together in a really important part of the table, and now you have to.
Hmm.
Oh, what's the third counter on the bottom of that pile? And you're trying to take it all apart, and it was a nightmare. And then what the counters would like hook onto each other via these little dog ears hanging off the corner of
Yeah.
it. It was a
Yeah.
mess. Yeah.
Yeah. I never punched or clipped a counter in my life. Hey,
No one,
to each their
no
own.
one's perfect.
This is true. But yeah, I mean, just those. It's almost like back when my dad and my uncle were doing the Civil War in miniature. We cast our own figures and all that from lead.
Yep.
Um, I remember spending hours just setting up the battlefield before even playing the game. The game would take like I don't know 4 hours, but it took us like 5 hours to set it up. Because you had to organize your guys and put them in the lines and sort. So I mean, it was like this whole experience outside of just playing the game. So I don't think it's like that anymore. I don't think people have time to do that anymore, to be honest with you. So, I don't know why the world is the way it is these days where you don't have time to set up and do all that good stuff like you
There's
did
just a
back in
lot
the
of other
day.
stuff to do. The world's
Yeah,
become more complicated.
that
We
is
have
very true.
access
You
to more
remember?
things, so we have
Yeah. Do you remember when they told us when computers were coming out? I was in the Army in '86, on. And I remember when we got our first computers um, in the unit, and they said, "Computer's going to change everything. You're going to do less paperwork. It's going to make things easier. Yada yada, save time and be efficient." I don't know about you, but I still print a lot of crap.
Oh no,
Um,
I PDF everything. I haven't
yeah. Well, I mean, we're going to PDFs now, but
this printer up here hasn't actually worked. I don't know why I don't just throw it out. It hasn't worked in like 8 years, and I don't even care.
yeah,
Everything's PDF.
yeah,
Um, I mean, I've seen it in my personal and and like my job. I mean, nobody prints anything anymore.
yeah. But yeah, I can remember those first mobile computers we got in the army. They were supposed to be field, operable, so you could go out there and do, like our adjutant general, our PSC company, our personal services company, could take their computers to the field to do MOB packets and stuff like that. And they were. Do you remember the SX64, the mobile Commodore computer that was in a huge box? I had one. I actually owned
Okay,
one.
I remember the
But
Commodore
it was
64, but like
yeah.
the
They had a
civilian version.
yeah, the Commodore 64 had a portable version. It was a built-in screen. It had a floppy drive, a keyboard that detached. It was color monitor, the whole
Oh
nine
yeah, it
yards.
was like a laptop, but it was like that thick, and
Yeah,
like
it was like
that
a
was the
huge
screen.
suitcase.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that a floppy drive?
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
oh,
It's
look at
time for
that.
retro, man. I still have these. There's actually data on these too, old manuscripts and
Awesome.
shit.
There you go. So yeah, it just changing times.
I
I just
will, I
think.
will totally agree with you on this. When computers first kind of came out, and they're like, computers are gonna like, invent the paperless
Mhm.
office. Back in the old 14-inch green bar with the little holes on each side, paper went
Yes.
through the friggin' roof. And they're like, it did the exact opposite. What do you mean paperless office? I could build an office out of document boxes right now.
Yeah.
And then it settled back down. But for a while,
Yeah.
I think people weren't used to it. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, oh wait, I can have all the information. I can print everything. And like I used to be like that. I used to print emails and put them in binders so I could refer to them later. It's like this is back in the 90s. Like
Yeah.
what the hell, dude? You're missing the point of email. Why are you?
Yeah. So yeah, I think we're in the second golden age of wargaming just because of the accessibility of having digital. You know, um, the internet has helped in a lot of ways, and hurt in some ways because sometimes people won't get together to play. Luckily for you, Jim, you've got the gaming club you guys are a part of. Um, we're looking for a club up here, or even starting our own to host, just so we can get more action going. So,
I think
but
that on the
yeah,
balance, the internet's been a far greater help to wargaming than any kind of hindrance. Only
yeah,
because at the end of the day, like what's wargaming about? Is it about history? Is it about game? Is it about it's a niche community. And Rule 34 of the internet, if it exists, it's out there. And you can find, it's the fastest way to connect with people that have similar interests. Like I
yeah,
never would have met Damon without the internet, or Bruce Lee, or Dylan, or Rasmus, or 50 other people.
right,
Honestly, I never would have met
exactly,
you without the internet.
it,
You know,
exactly, exactly. So it's all good. So, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the show. I want to thank Jim for coming in on his sabbatical to join me. Otherwise, I'd be staring at you guys going, "What are we talking about now?"
Oop.
Uh, or Dawn would be with me, and I love Dawn, and she's great, but she doesn't know anything historical. To her, it's all Harry Potter and Disney, so um, it's all good. So, thank you to you all as we get ready to say goodbye. Have a great week. We will see you with our next bit of programming, uh, and take care. And if you have anything, oh, you know what? Before I sign off, I wanted to share something real quick. Let me do this. Sorry, guys. Um, our Discord channel.
Oh yeah.
So if you guys have not been part of our Discord channel yet, please do so. Um, there is an extensive community in our Discord channel,
Yeah, we're up to like
and
220 people now.
yeah, and the more importantly, there is the Andy Zeck Painting Award and the Terrain Award. We need you guys to start submitting your submissions for this. And let's see some submissions for painting and terrain. And as you can see, we've got stuff in our announcement page showing us, our podcast. We have all these different things. Even Jim has a thing about HK Ops, which is his role-playing rule set. That's really fun if you have not played it. He did some live streaming on that
Way back
last
in the
year
day,
or
yeah.
so. I mean, there's been time. So if you want to catch up and see that, that's always a good option too. So please join our Discord channel and join in on the amazing community that we have. So we appreciate it. So guys, thank you very much. And we will see you in the next show. Take care.
You have been listening to the Sitrep podcast. We hope you have enjoyed the show. Make sure you like and subscribe to all of our channels on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Discord. Remember to join us every other weekend for a new episode of the podcast, and don't forget our other programming on Wednesdays and Sundays.